Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining my Go Live, whether you're live or watching it later. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for stopping by. It's a Saturday, still early. I'm just still in my workout clothes. Got my work done this morning. I'm looking forward to our conversation. I plan to cover news that you should know, news from the week. And what I'll do to cover our news is I'll just scan through some of my LinkedIn posts. And hopefully you're following me on LinkedIn. Hopefully you're checking out my post. Every day I post one or two or three, posts on articles, key information. What I try to do is summarize. I summarize whatever the article is or the newsletter or the concept. I speak to the impact. I suggest some action points for real estate and mortgage professionals. And then I put a link to the article or newsletter. If at any time you're interested in one of the articles and if it's behind a paywall, if you DM me, I'll send you a copy of the article. But 90% of the time, the articles are accessible through the links that I provide. But like I said, if they're not, let me know and I'll shoot you a copy of the article if you want. So let's start. On Monday, I started by Monday. I only had a single post, and it was on Doug Duncan's forecast. And I've already covered this, so I won't spend a lot of time here. I'll just summarize it. He sees that there's going to be there's going to be two Fed cuts this year. He thinks we'll end the year. And by the way, Doug Duncan is the chief economist at Fannie Mae. And so he thinks two cuts this year with a bias towards one versus a bias towards three. He thinks we're going to end the year at 7% for 30-year fixed rate, and next year at 6.5% on a 30-year fixed rate. He thinks homes will appreciate about 3% this year. He believes there will be some market volatility in the interest rates, mainly because the buyers of interest rates are changing and the Fed is over communicating, causing the market to zig and zag. In the article, he mentioned the concept of home affordability. Affordability, there are three components. They're closely aligned. It's interest rates, home prices, and personal income. Kind of dictates home affordability. One of the concepts he brought up in the article, which I hadn't really seen before, and let me know if you've seen it, is that independent mortgage banks some are going dormant, meaning they're closing down and just waiting for a better market to reopen. I haven't seen that, but maybe it will happen. And finally, he said we just need to get used to a new normal of higher interest rates that we'll probably never see 3 or 4%. And we hope we don't, because the economic chaos that would have to happen to create that would be more negative than positive. So that's my post Monday, Doug Duncan, really worth a read. Tuesday, I started with Mike Del Preetz highlighting his newsletter. It's data and context into meaning. It's a free newsletter. It's great. Subscribe to it. He covered his topic was Zillow, Redfin, and some other entities really expanding into mortgages. And what the newsletter was really about is Zillow's recent expansion. And what he mentioned is that Zillow has doubled their number of MLOs in the last 14 months, and they have increased their origination volume by over 130% in the last 12 months. And so Zillow is really making a big move into the mortgage space. And Mike talks about kind of what it means, what's the implication. He also discussed Redfin. Redfin bought Bay Equity back in 2022. Since that purchase, they've seen a decrease in MLO count by about 30%. So that's probably not going exactly as Redfin wanted to go. And both Redfin and Zillow are just trying to monetize mortgages off of what their current, income and customer stream is. One last thing that Mike mentioned in his newsletter that caught my eye and I was surprised by is that Better Mortgage apparently is back from the abyss. Better Mortgage had doubled their MLO count in 12 months, and that is after shedding 1,000 loan officers in 2022. So Better is coming back, trying to recreate itself. I mentioned that. Interesting about Better, back in the day, Better was known for flat fee loan officers, low paid loan officers. This time around, they're going to jettison that and go with fully commissioned loan officers, believing that it's going to be a better product, a better experience, higher conversion rates. But anyway, that's Mike Del Preetz's newsletter, Data and Context into Meaning. I also shared on Tuesday some data from TKER newsletter. It was Sam Rowe. That is fantastic newsletter. I subscribe to the free one. It comes out on Sundays. It's understanding macro cross currents in charts. It is fantastic. Sam Rowe has great, analysis around that. The part that I share with you from his newsletter was that he was arguing that, higher net worth supports lower savings rate. And so he was saying, look, we don't have to be so freaked out that savings rates are dropping, because today most Americans have a much higher net worth. They have far more assets. Financial assets. They have more assets in their home, more equity. And as if you have, millions of dollars in your, stock trading account, you don't need to have millions of dollars in your bank account, and that accounts for the lower savings. I thought that was kind of interesting. Moving on to Wednesday, I started with Axios newsletter. I'm surprised. That's a really good newsletter. It comes out every single day. It's also free. I get really good stuff from that newsletter. But one of the things that I pulled out of the Wednesday's newsletter was the impact immigration has on job growth. And I've mentioned this before, but what Axios points out is that immigrants have filled 50% of the non-farm payroll positions since October of 2023. So in the last, 10 months or 9 months, immigrants have filled half the open positions. Now, imagine if we didn't have immigrants, we would have massive labor shortages and unbelievable upward pressure on wages, which would really, causing inflation to just get out of control, which of course would adversely affect interest rates and then homes and real estate, and mortgages. So immigration has been key to helping us stem inflation. That was the Axios newsletter. I also shared on Wednesday a chart. I don't remember who the chart was from. I forget. You can find it on my LinkedIn. But it was the evolution of technology in American households, and the chart showed, and it's a very busy chart, but it showed like 50 common technologies that have been introduced to households in the last 100 years, like plumbing, telephone, washing machine, dryer, landline, all the way up to tablet, cell phone. And the point of the chart is that the rate of adoption is radically or exponentially improving in American households. So where it took like 100 years for the majority of houses to get, air conditioning, it only took like 5 years for the average house to have a computer tablet. So the rate of adoption is just dramatically increasing, and in that, I opined on a few things how that might impact real estate and mortgage. Getting on to Thursday. Thursday was a busy post day for me. I posted quite a few things. I'll only cover a few of them here. First, Bloomberg's newsletter, Points of Return. Now, let me just tell you, this is another everyday fantastic newsletter. And what I like about Bloomberg is almost all of Bloomberg's articles are behind paywalls. And so unless you subscribe to Bloomberg, you're not going to get to those articles. And they're all really, really, really good. But if you subscribe to the Bloomberg newsletter, Points of Return, you get a lot of their data, and it's not behind a paywall. And so I really enjoy reading it. On Thursday's edition, or I think it was Wednesday's edition of Points of Return, they cover the CPI numbers. That's been covered ad nauseum. We don't need to cover here again, but they brought up just the Fed pivoting from watching year-over-year results for inflation to month-over-month results. They also talked about how the Fed is really, their decisions are driven by job openings and wages. The one thing that they did comment on that I like to pay attention to is the R rate, or neutral rate. And the neutral rate is where the Fed rate is neither accommodating, meaning it's not, it's not trying to drive the economy, but it's not restrictive. It's neutral. It doesn't have an influence. And they thought that was moving from 2.5% to 2.8%. So that was an interesting article. Next on Thursday was the Inman article, and it was an editorial. It was titled 30 Years of Brutally Honest Business Advice from Jimmy Burgess. And in there, he just said, hey, here's the brutal truth. Here's what you got to do. He lists, I think, 8 or 9 points, in brutal honesty. Jimmy writes for the Housing Wire, probably comes out, it wasn't Housing Wire, it was Inman. Sorry, for Inman. He probably does an article in Inman once a month, and they're all pretty good. They're mostly coaching kind of based, like, hey, agents, here's what we can do. But in this article, the points brought up was consistent action, um, constantly having business conversations, really passionate about personal growth, being able to be adaptability into different markets and different circumstances, having local expertise, focus on the things that you can control, constantly be seeking new opportunities, and that relationships matter. It was a pretty good article, and once again, it was in Inman. And then on Thursday, I posted the John Burns Housing Affordability Index. And the key point, the easiest way to explain that is what they said in there is, look, a 7% 30-year fixed mortgage today feels like a 15% 30-year fixed mortgage in 1982. And the reason why is taxes are higher, homeowners insurance is higher, and wages are lower relative to cost of goods. And so because of that, it really feels like we're more in like a 1982 high inflation environment than it feels like today. So that was a interesting article. It speaks to what our consumers, like the psychology of our consumers buying homes, and it's important for us to understand that so that we can advise them through it. And then finally on Thursday, I posted Ben Carlson's A Wealth of Common Sense. That's another great newsletter. It's really good. It's also free, but and in that newsletter, what he addressed on, I think it was from Wednesdays actually, but in that newsletter, what he addressed is that the bottom 50% of households are experiencing significant financial gains. And because of that, the wealth gap is narrowing. Now, the wealth gap is still super wide, so we haven't solved this. But the actual wages on the bottom 50% of earners have actually increased far faster than the top 50%. And so it's good to see it's good to see the wealth gap shrink, and that was good news. I appreciate that article, that newsletter. So getting on to Friday, we started out with it had nothing to do with anything other than I thought it was interesting, is the economics of a cruise. I don't exactly remember where it came from, but it came from some newsletter, and it was fascinating. The average ticket price for a cruise is $1,125. Now, I always seem to spend more than that, but it's $1,125. And then the average onboard spending is $600. So, and that, think of like spa treatments and things like that. So the average revenue is about $1,725. The average operating cost for a cruise per person is $1,145. So it's interesting, the average operating cost is higher than the average ticket price. That seems like weird pricing. And I think this was, by the way, for Norwegian cruises. I can't remember which cruise line, but it was specific to one cruise line. Or it might have been for Carnival. You can check out the link, but check out the post in LinkedIn. But so if your average ticket price is $1,125, your operating expense is $1,145, you're making a little bit of income off of on-ship services for $600, but then you have depreciation, which is like $575 or something. But here's the crazy thing: the net is that the cruise line that they highlighted is only making $150 per passenger per cruise. Like, that doesn't seem like enough. Like, that doesn't seem like enough to me. But it's really interesting. And if you go on cruises for $1,125, ping me, tell me how you do it. The last cruise we went on was a lot more expensive than that. So if you have the secret sauce, let me know. I'd love to know. And then getting into more important topics on Friday. I highlighted a Sherwood newsletter. They have two. I couldn't remember whether it came out of Snacks. I can't remember the other name of the Sherwood newsletter. But and this was really interesting because it showed that Americans now spend more on dining out than they spend on dining in, which I don't know. I don't know if that blows my mind or if that's what I do. Maybe that's my behavior too. I don't know, but we spend, Americans now spend 53% of their total food budget on going out versus 47% on going in. And to give you perspective, in 1997, that number was we spent 59% of our food budget on eating at home and 41% of our budget on eating out. And I think that the important part here and why we need to pay attention to it is, Americans are very sensitive to inflation. And part of it is because they're experiencing massive food inflation through going out. And we have to battle their perception of how the economy is doing and how they're doing. And one of the things that we can help talk them off the ledge is we can investigate, look, what's your food consumption behavior? Are you eating out a ton? And maybe you can afford the house that you want, you just can't go out every day. And we have to kind of talk through those kind of issues. But And then I ended up Friday with a Kiplinger article, which I talked about yesterday, which is, there's a lot of really, really good signs in retirement savings, 401ks. More people are participating in them. They're at a higher level than they've ever been. It was a really positive article. However, overall in the grand scheme of things, still far too few people participate in retirement. And we're saving far too little, and our retirement savings will not provide us the standard of living we're used to when we retire. And the whole point of sharing that article was, that we, as loan officers or as real estate and mortgage professionals, it's really our responsibility to help people achieve, security and wealth through home ownership that will lead them into a comfortable retirement. That there's a huge gap to fill that we can help fill because they're not doing it with their retirement savings alone. That gets me to today. I have a few postings today. One, I posted a Newsweek article about refinances are surging. The reason why I post this is a lot of times, we're just so purchase focused that we forget that people are refinancing. And last week there was a surge, a 28% increase in refinance applications from week over week and year over year. Right. And so the smallest little bumps down in interest rate really get people off the ledge for refinancing. And there's a few things here. The three things I would just, really implore you to do. One, stay connected to your past clients. Two, don't let your own limiting beliefs about what a good interest rate is or a bad interest rate prevent you from talking to your past clients. Because here's the fact. You want to know something? And it goes up and down by about 1 or 2 percentage points. But most loan officers only successfully help refinance 25% of their past clients that refinance. That means, of your clients that refinance, 80% of them go to a competitor, mainly because you're not talking to them, because you probably have an opinion that, hey, they don't need a 7% rate, they're at 3%. And that goes to because we're not paying attention to their total cost of debt service for the household. Once you take into cars and HELOCs and credit lines and credit cards, we're thinking, gosh, you'd never want to get off your 3% mortgage, but they may have thousands of dollars in consumer debt at 25% interest rate that we could refinance and help them. And when we don't have the conversation, our competitors do, and that's why we only retain 20% of our past clients. And so that's an interesting article. And then also, I threw in a Housing Wire article from earlier this week about VA turning 80. It's such a good thing, the VA loans have, injected about $3.9 trillion into the economy. 93% of vets who, when they buy their first home, use a VA loan. And 80% of them are 34 years or younger. I mean, it's all good. And by the way, they have a VA loan services a higher percentage of minorities and females as a proportion of their total borrowers. VA loan has just been awesome, and it's well deserved. And then finally, I did throw in a little bit of fun stuff on Saturday's post. I threw in this really funky article about duct tape stuck at the prom contest, where high school students can enter a contest about the best dress or tuxedo they created from duct tape. If you go to my post, I have a link to the article, which has a link to a gallery of photos. Some of those dresses and tux are pretty styling, man. You wouldn't tell they're from duct tape. I just threw that in for fun. I thought it was really interesting. That's the news from the week. I appreciate you listening to me today. I'll be back again at 7:30 tomorrow morning. But if anything I talked about today interests you, go to my LinkedIn. You can find it in the post. I have a link to the article, and I'll keep trying to give you relevant news that can help you in your business. That's it. I hope you guys have a wonderful Saturday. I'll see you tomorrow morning. Thanks so much. Bye.